Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's an honor and a privilege to stand here before all of you all here this afternoon. My name is Lee May. I'm the pastor of Transforming Faith Church, and I am the president of the DeKalb Pastors Christian Alliance here in DeKalb County. Behind me are a coalition of pastors, of leaders, of faith leaders, some allies as well, who are supporting us in this endeavor on this afternoon. Today we announce the launching of a boycott of Home Depot. Now, we didn't get here overnight. This wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. We as faith leaders have been attempting for quite some time to sit down with our political leadership here in Georgia, to sit down with those who were making key decisions about election integrity, about voting laws here in Georgia. We had tremendous concerns about what we saw going on under the Gold Dome. And as we all saw just weeks ago, Senate Bill 202 passed very quickly. The governor, in an unprecedented fashion, signed the bill immediately, and the picture was so poor. It was horrible. A picture of all white men, nothing wrong with white men, but all white men in a room sitting down or standing underneath a portrait that portrayed a plantation. Now, pictures speak volume. And that picture for us really sent the message that this legislation, both in spirit and in the law, literally, was intended to suppress the vote of black and brown people. We saw that immediately. The lion's share of the political leadership refused to meet with us. I personally reached out to the governor's office, the speaker's office, the lieutenant governor, the Senate majority leader. We reached out and very few even had the audacity to respond. Then we asked our corporate leadership here in Georgia and around the country to support us, to use their tremendous platform to stand up and speak out against what we saw as Jim Crow-like activity. And so many of them remained silent. They remained silent before the passing of the legislation, and then after the passage of the legislation, when we began to threaten a possible boycott, then calls began to come in. And our leader, Bishop Reginald Jackson, who has really been spearheading this and pulling this all together, began to receive calls from Coca-Cola and others about what they could do to turn the page on this, to speak out, to be proactive, to be a real ally in what was going on. And so they helped us to pull together corporate leaders. Look, we didn't get here overnight. We sat down and talked and reached out in an effort to bring people together, to really address what we saw was really untenable actions by our legislature. So that brings us here today, the launch of this boycott, a boycott that is being led by faith leaders, by clergy, by men and women of the cloth. Now, we embrace other allies, we embrace community leadership, we embrace advocacy leaders all around, but let's be very clear today that this is a moment where faith leaders are standing up and standing out to speak against this. And we're asking corporate America to stand with us. There's a reason why we are boycotting Home Depot, and we're going to really delve into that during our press conference here today. Before I go on any further, I want to bring up Reverend Susan Buxton, the pastor of Allen Temple AME Church in Atlanta, Georgia. She is here to present a statement that is written by Bishop Reginald Jackson. He is the bishop who presides over the state of Georgia, the AME Church over the state of Georgia. This is the 6th district, and she is coming to bring words on his behalf. Reverend Buxton.
Praise the Lord. Thank you. Again, this is a prepared statement written by the presiding prelate of the 6th Episcopal District, Bishop Reginald T. Jackson. Following the November 2020 election, 47 states introduced more than 360 bills dealing with voting and elections. The intent of most of these bills is to suppress and make it harder for blacks and people of color to vote. This because in states like Georgia, blacks and people of color voted in huge numbers, especially by absentee ballot and early voting. They turned Georgia from red to blue and turned out again in January 2021 and turned 2 U.S. Senate seats blue. This legislation is based on the big lie told by the former liar-in-chief that the election was stolen from him. This legislation not only targets blacks and people of color, but it is a threat to our democracy and government of the people, by the people, and for the people. This legislation must be defeated. Unfortunately, here in Georgia, Senate Bill 202, the Election Integrity Act of 2021, has passed. Faith leaders, our congregations, Black Voters Matter, the NAACP, New Georgia Project, and other organizations spoke out against this legislation. However, corporate leaders, particularly national corporations whose home base is here in Georgia, did not speak out. Some of them met privately with the governor's office and state legislatures and applauded the legislation. After faith leaders threatened to boycott, several corporations who had applauded the legislation reversed themselves and spoke out against the legislation. We commend companies like Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, and many others who have now spoken out, and we are glad to have them as partners in this struggle for a just and enduring democracy. During the last 12 days, we have met with some other corporate leaders to seek to get them to demonstrate corporate responsibility and speak out both publicly and collectively against this suppressive and racist legislation. Let us be clear, this legislation is modern-day Jim Crow, which seeks to make it harder for blacks and people of color to vote. The bill deceptively expands voting in rural areas of the state that benefit Republicans, but it maliciously makes it harder. It maliciously makes it harder and inconvenient for voters in urban areas of Georgia where most blacks and people of color live. Blacks and people of color spend our money and buy the products of these corporations just like whites, and corporations should publicly speak out and oppose legislation that discriminates and speaks to suppress our votes. If you as corporate leaders do not believe and lack the courage to speak out against this legislation, we will not spend our money to purchase your products. We have done all we can to reach out to corporate leaders, to speak with them, persuade them, to listen to them, and reason with them. Some have not responded to invitations to meet or made an effort to meet. We have simply been ignored. A boycott is not something we wanted to do, but now it is something that we must do. So today, we announce and begin a boycott of Home Depot, the largest company in Georgia. We boycott them because they have simply refused to respond not only to our request to meet, but to their other corporate partners. They believe their silence is appropriate, but not on the issue of voting rights. Blacks and people of color, like others, are also their customers, and they benefit from our dollars and our purchase of their products. We believe they should oppose any effort to suppress our votes. Who we eventually boycott is fluid. It is subject to change. Some, like Chick-fil-A and Arby's, could be added dependent upon whether or not or how they respond. We will be reaching out to them this week. Let us be clear, this boycott is called by faith leaders. We have noted that some are putting responsibility for this boycott on President Biden, Stacey Abrams, and other elected officials. This is untrue. We have not asked for support for this boycott from any political leaders or elected officials. This is because this is not a partisan matter. This is about the greatest right in our democracy, the right to vote. We note that those who seek to put responsibility for this boycott on politicians are those who believe they will benefit from suppressing the votes of blacks and people of color. Just as we believe corporations have a responsibility to speak out on behalf of their customers, we as pastors have a responsibility to speak out for and act on behalf of our congregants and communities. Therefore, we are calling upon blacks, people of color, and all American citizens who believe that the right to vote is the foundation of our democracy and that every eligible voter should be able to cast his or her vote without it being made hard to vote to support this boycott. We are rallying the support of national organizations to support this effort. We already have the commitment of the Connectional African Methodist Episcopal Church, the National Action Network, and the Conference of National Black Churches. Next week, we will announce the support of other denominations, national organizations, fraternities, and sororities. This will be a national effort because we face a national attack to our freedom to vote. The big lie that sparked legislation in Georgia has spread across the nation and calls upon corporate leaders across the country to speak out and exercise leadership. They do have influence, and we call upon them to use that influence. Texas, Arizona, Michigan, and Florida are acting now on this legislation, and we need corporate influence to defeat it in those states. And we call upon them to use it collectively. We have seen in Georgia what happens when a corporation speaks out by itself. The governor and legislature seek to retaliate, but when a group of corporate leaders speak out, it makes it hard for legislators to retaliate. And the American people take notice, which pressures legislators, and nothing changes without pressure. Today, we begin this boycott. It will require sacrifice and cause inconvenience. Prayerfully, this will be short-term, but in the long term, it will help to defeat suppressive legislation all across this nation and help to pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act, federal legislation, which will provide protection and standards for every state and citizen across this country. If we truly are the United States, we ought to be united and stand uniform in this effort. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Pastor Jamal Harrison Bryant from New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Stonecrest, Georgia. I'm reminded of when Dr. King wrote a letter from the Birmingham jail, and he said to those who opposed him, "We are here because injustice is here." And that is the reason why we're standing outside of Home Depot, is because we feel grave injustice is taking place, not just across the street, but around the country, from failing to operate in integrity from a corporation. How one of the lead characters, albeit fictional, from the Avengers was Thor. And Thor's only superpower was that he had a hammer. That hammer, out of Norwegian mythology, suggested it was for defense and it was to bless. That hammer was to bless and it was for defense, but it never worked when it wasn't in his hand. The reality is that what is in the hands of the people is what makes democracy work. What is in the hands of the people is what the electorate works on. It is, in fact, known as power to the people. In 1867, one of America's oldest corporations was Arm & Hammer. They said it was strong enough, but delicate enough to handle every room and every circumstance. As a consequence, that baking soda, that baking powder has, in fact, trust of the American people because it knows the strength of a hammer. Regrettably, all of Minnesota is collectively holding its breath, waiting for the judge to return back, to hear what the jury is going to say, and hear what will happen when the gavel, or in Roman tradition, the hammer comes down. We're hoping that the judge in Minneapolis, that the people at Marvel Comics, and even those at Arm & Hammer will not get any of their instruments from Home Depot, because we don't believe that that instrument is effective for building a real American nation. As faith leaders, we come in quaking trepidation afraid of the ethics and the morality of Home Depot, feeling it prudent to be silent in this moment. We're 3 weeks away from Good Friday, and we are in fact shuddering at the possibility that if Home Depot was open, they would have sold the nails and hammer to crucify Christ, because they are against dignity and justice for all. In a few moments, our governor, Kemp, is going to make a statement in retaliation to what it is that faith leaders are doing. And we understand his position and realize that he is still auditioning to be in Donald Trump's favor. But because we know of whom we are called and we know the authority by which we stand, this is not a Democratic or a Republican issue, but this is a moral issue. It is his stance, Governor Kemp's, that this is in fact a boycott that threatens employment. And I want to remind Governor Kemp that was the same language that the mayor of Montgomery said when they started the Montgomery bus boycott. And those who were workers of the buses of Montgomery said that we would rather walk in dignity than ride in shame. We are calling out not just for churches, but for construction teams and for demolition crews to get all of your resources, not from Home Depot. The same argument that Governor Kemp levies today is the same argument that the authorities in South Africa said when we called for sanctions in South Africa because of apartheid. And from jail, like Dr. King, Nelson Mandela said, I would rather be behind bars and raise the bar than be free and find my conscience still enslaved. Today, we are calling for every person of conscience, not just in Georgia, but around the country, to make a critical stance and paint until we see a new America. Build until every person has access. To construct until your children will not have to work from the sweat of their brow. Governor Kemp fails to realize that he is threatening a people who have put ethics over a paycheck for years in eternity. Can I remind him that it was, in fact, one football player who took a knee, Colin Kaepernick, who said, I'd rather have my dignity than have my paycheck. I want to remind you, it was Dave Chappelle who walked away from a 7-figure deal because he would rather have his dignity than have a paycheck. And so while it is that DIY has escalated under this pandemic, from people who are redoing their kitchen, their basement, their bathroom, we're calling all of them, if you want to redo the house, redo the State House, because that's where the real renovation needs to happen and why this election is so critical and it is so pivotal. We are here simply because injustice is here. And we realize that Georgia is now the talking head for the entire nation. Be very clear that this piece of legislation passed not because of voter fraud, but because of voter turnout. Black and brown people came at strong numbers to elect, and we did so, and we let not just the nation know, but the world know that Georgia cannot be discounted. The question is asked, why in the world would Bishop Reggie Jackson call on Home Depot, call Coca-Cola, call Delta Airlines? Because we understand through the lens and the gauge of history the significance of Delta, the significance of Coca-Cola, and the significance of Home Depot. Home Depot was started in 1978 in Los Angeles, but still they will not say why they moved to Georgia. All of these companies moved to Georgia because of the sacrifice of Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, who made it amenable for a market to come. And as a consequence, we are the epicenter of commerce for this nation, right in the place where segregation took place. And so right on this soil, we march to sit at lunch counters. From this soil, we march and boycotted to, in fact, drink from water fountains. From this soil, we march to integrate schools and to integrate housing communities. We understand the inconvenience of a boycott, but we also know the fruit of the boycott. And so we are telling Home Depot, it is always the right time to do the right thing. And this is the right thing for Home Depot. One of the first songs that you learn as a child is, if I had a hammer, I'd ring it in the morning. We are ringing the hammer for justice, for democracy, and for free voting. When will we stop? We will not stop until these laws have been changed, until the John Lewis bill has been passed, and every state that is in danger will say, if Georgia can do it, America can do it. We are standing strong because we believe America is incomplete. The roof has not been built because Home Depot has faulty projects and they've got faulty ethics. Let's keep building and let's march on until victory is won and people in Georgia can vote and drink water at the same time.
Somebody told me I should never come behind Jamal Harrison Bryant. Why would they do that? Problem is, I did it myself, right? But here's the reality. We stand here collectively representing over 1,000 churches, here in Georgia alone. 1,000 churches, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of parishioners, of members. So we stand here collectively together to launch this boycott. There's some things that we want to see here. So this boycott is based upon four specific things. Four specific things we want to see these corporations that we're talking to, for them to embrace. And this is for Home Depot specifically. Number one, we want them to speak out publicly in opposition to Senate Bill 202. Not just talk about wanting fair and free elections. No, that sounds good, but that sounds like a lot of lukewarmness, and our Bible speaks about lukewarmness. So we want them to speak out against Senate Bill 202. Number two, we want them to speak out publicly against any of these measures across the country that are seeking to suppress the vote of any person of gender or color. We want them to speak out publicly. I reached out to one of my former colleagues over in the state of Texas, in Dallas County. And I told him to send me over the link of the latest legislation in Texas that is dealing with voting. And he sent me over the link. I looked at it, and it looked almost identical to Senate Bill 202. There's something going on around the country where there's a legitimate, well, not a legitimate, there's a structured attempt to reduce and limit the votes of certain people. So number two, we want them to speak out against all measures of legislation nationwide that are seeking to suppress the vote. Number three, we want them to support federal legislation that expands voter access, that expands, that also restricts the ability to suppress the vote as well. And so we've heard about the John Lewis Act, the Voter Rights Act that is going on under in Washington, D.C. by our Congress. Regardless of what the title is, regardless of what the number is, we want them to speak out in support of greater voter access. And also those restrictions that can be put in place from a federal standpoint that will limit attempts such as what is going on here to suppress the vote. And finally, we want them to support any efforts legally that are going on to stop legislation like 202 and others around the country. There's litigation that's already been put forward to stop Senate Bill 202 and in foresight other pieces of legislation that may do the same. And so we want corporations to do the same thing that we are supporting, which is litigation. We want them to invest in litigation, legal attempts to stop these legislations that is going on around the country. Those are four things. And so, yes, we will be fluid in this boycott. We will be fluid. And so, Home Depot, we're calling on you. I'm speaking to you right now. We're open to talk. We're ready to have a conversation with you. You haven't been ready up to now, but our arms are wide open. We are people of faith, people of grace, and we're ready to have this conversation. But we're very clear, those four things that we want to see accomplished as well. I'm going to bring up now Reverend Timothy McDonald to talk about the state of this boycott and some other things as well. Reverend McDonald.
Thank you, members of the press, for being here today. And to you, my brothers and sisters, we're honored to gather in the shadow of Home Depot that is in the business of building homes, and it appears tearing down democracy. You've already heard why we are here. A few years ago, one of the largest grocery chains in the state of Georgia was called Winn-Dixie. Some of you may remember Winn-Dixie Grocery. At that time, I was the National Director of Operation Breadbasket for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We launched a boycott against Winn-Dixie. They were selling products from South Africa, and we were trying to free Nelson Mandela. We want Home Depot to know today that this is just phase one. This is just information phase. This is just to let you know that we are here. It's up to you whether or not Home Depot, this boycott escalates to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Some of you may be asking, we're in a safe place. We did that deliberately. We came across the street. We're not on your property today. We're not blocking your driveways today. We're not inside your store protesting today. This is just phase 1. And we want the governor to hear us loud and clear. The reason that we are here is because of the actions of Governor Kemp. Be clear about this. And it did not just start when he was Secretary of State. He purged more than 1 million voters from the roll. Why? So that he could win. 1.5 million voters were purged from the rolls so that he could win. An election that the facts tell us was only 55,000 out of about 5 million. He knew what he was doing then, and he knows what he's doing now. But you can fool me once, and it's shame on me. But you try to fool me twice, and it's going to be shame on you. We understand that the governor has already called a press conference today because the governor knows the faith community, we mean business. This is not a sprint, brothers and sisters. This is a marathon. And we're in this thing for the long haul. And Home Depot needs to understand we ain't going nowhere. This is only phase 1. But we are more than confident if you continue to ignore us. Home Depot did not answer a phone call while we're here. They did not send a text message. They did not send or answer an email. They act as if we, members of the faith community, did not even exist. You want to make some preachers mad? Act like we don't exist. Act like we are invisible. Act like we are the spook who sat by the door. That's why we are here. And we want to send a message loud and clear. Home Depot, we know you supported Governor Kemp. You talk about we're not involved in political action. That's a lie. Our job as people of faith is to speak truth to power. You said that you don't get your money. Home Depot has put millions of dollars into campaigns across the state of Georgia. Why is the governor so hurried to respond today? Because one of the biggest contributors to the Republican Party is Home Depot. This is not about Democrat or Republican. I'm just stating a fact. And the time has come, as we had to do for Winn-Dixie, who lost Dixie. You can't find a store. They used to have a store right here at this plaza. They used to. If Home Depot does not do the thing by the voters of Georgia, they will become a used to. We know as people of faith that giants do fall. They may be the largest employer in the state of Georgia, but our faith reminds us that giants, they do fall. When we got God on our side, no weapons formed against God's people are going to be able to prosper. So why are we here? We are here today to teach our dollars some sense. Let me say that again. That's one of them preaching phrases that went right over some of y'all. We are here today to teach our dollars some sense. Now, I know young folk don't carry cash no more, and I'm almost through. But I need, if you got $1, just take one and put it in your hand. If you got $1, get $1 out.
Give me one more. I ain't getting no
Y'all got something over there? See, Home Depot, they got money, and we know they got money, but we got money too. Every time we step in that store, we spending money, and we tired of paying for our own oppression. We tired of supporting corporations who are oppressing and denying all citizens the right to vote. I want you to hold that dollar bill up. We're going to teach our dollars some sense. Now, y'all know how we do it in church? Let's just say, teach our dollars some sense. Hold it up. Let's say it again. Teach our dollars some sense. Let's say it again. Teach our dollars some sense. One more for the Father. Teach our dollars some sense. One more for the Son. Teach our dollars some sense. And one more for the Holy Ghost. Teach our dollars some sense. God bless you. See you at phase 2.
Take your money back, Pastor. Take your money back. We're almost done. We're almost done. I feel like we're going to church now. For the media, I don't know if you've ever been in a black church service, but we could be here all day. I'm going to bring up Reverend Dr. Cynthia Hale to bring a couple of comments as well, and then we'll open up for some questions immediately following that. Pastor Hill.
Thank you, Pastor Lee, and all of my clergy colleagues and members of the community of faith and the press for this opportunity. I pastor the Ray of Hope Christian Church only about 5 miles from here. And when I shared with one of my members what I was going to do today at noon, she said, I want you to just say this simple thing. Enough is enough. We have had enough. And then she reminded me that she, along with other persons, had built homes and had purchased the supplies that they needed to build those homes right here at Home Depot. But things were about to change, she said, because no longer would she be shopping at this place. She said, you can have a boycott or not. I'm not shopping there anymore. I want you to also know that because of the state's position, the governor and the legislators, people are also want to make clear, especially people of color, that we are not afraid. The Holy Spirit has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power Love and a sound mind. We are in our right mind. And so we're in it for the long haul, as Pastor McDonald said. This is not a sprint. This is a long distance run. And we will persevere, knowing that we stand on the side of righteousness and justice. And we invite all people who believe in fairness, equity, and justice for all to join us. Thank you so much.
And so, in conclusion, today begins the boycott. Today begins the day that we truly allow our money to speak for us. You know, Jesus said in Matthew 6 that where your treasure is, your heart will be also. And today we're going to be intentional about where our heart is through our treasure. We believe in supporting those who support us. And the converse is the same. If you don't support us, we will not support you. Bishop Jackson, again, apologizes for his absence here. He is the bishop of 530 churches, and he is in Macon right now convening a conference of his district down there. We have, again, over 1,000 churches represented here. Bishop Thomas Brown, the bishop over the CME Church, represents over 250, nearly 300 churches here in Georgia. Bishop Lionel Catchings, the bishop of Full Gospel Fellowship Baptist Church, he's a state bishop here in Georgia, represents over 150 churches. We have the Concerned Black Clergy, who's aligned with this boycott. The DeKalb Pastors Christian Alliance, we are here in DeKalb. I'm the president of it, thankfully, for my colleagues who are here. And we have so many others in terms of supporting this boycott. But again, let's say a message to the governor. We are here because of you, Mr. Governor. We are here because of you. You refused to stand up to lies that were perpetuated, and the fruit of those lies arose in Senate Bill 202. And so if you believe this is a job-killing boycott, which it is not, that lands squarely at your doorstep. And you could do something to change this. We're here to talk and discuss, but there are some tangible things you must do too as well, Mr. Governor. Home Depot, we're here to talk. You hear our 4 points. That's phase 1. Let's get ready. Are y'all ready to go? Yeah.